Hi, welcome to Healthwatch. I'm Cindy Berry from Ledgelight Health District. You know, here in New England, winter brings some challenges, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the extreme winter weather that we can expect this year and its effects on our health and safety with Chief of the Fire Department in the City of Groton, Nick DeLia. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
There's so much to talk about. I think my page is full of questions, but maybe we can start a little bit about what do you do as a fire chief?
Well, my responsibility, I have two responsibilities. One is I'm the fire marshal in the city, and then I'm also the fire chief. I'm also the deputy emergency management director, so I have my fingers going in a couple different directions. Mm-hmm. My sole primary responsibility is to run the fire department, manage that, lead that. And that expands out my responsibilities quite a bit. Everything from the construction and building of buildings. My deputy chief takes care of a great deal of that for me. Mm-hmm. To planning for emergencies, and whether it's fire, waterborne emergencies, health emergencies. Basically, we have to try to keep ahead of the curve. Mm-hmm. And look what's happening across the country and across New England, because we are kind of our own little animal up here, and then figure out what's the best strategy for whatever those emergencies are.
And how did you get in this field?
Well, I grew up, my backdoor neighbor was a firefighter in the city. Mm-hmm. He eventually went on to become the deputy chief before he passed. And when I turned 18, my oil man was a member of the volunteer company, and he got me the paperwork, and I joined at 18 in the city. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome. Well, I think that we're very lucky to have such an amazing fire department, or fire departments in Groton. Talk a little bit about where you serve.
Yeah, the city of Groton is primarily the west side of the community. All together between the city of Groton proper and the West Pleasant Valley Fire District, we protect about 7 square miles. Mm-hmm. So our district goes all the way from the Sound, up the river, all the way to the entrance to the base. Mm-hmm. And then roughly out to Route 12, and then down, and then when we get down on the southern section, it follows the railroad tracks more than anything else. Mm-hmm. So we have big water, little water, highways, trains. You can't get to the airport or leave the airport without flying over the city. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we do a lot of highway work. Mm-hmm. It's been exciting this last few months. It was very exciting this weekend.
I bet.
As they did the switch over for the lanes. Mm-hmm. But that has dramatically already made it better for I-95. Unfortunately, it made it worse for us. Mm-hmm. Coming out of Bridge Street now is much more difficult in the afternoons. So we kind of suggest people take Clarence B. Sharp. Right. So that you come out, you now have your own lane instead of trying to merge in. Yeah. Interestingly, they did say, though, that you merge left better than you merge right. Because if you think about most exits, when you're coming off and getting on the highway, you're merging to the left. Right. So people are used to that, as opposed to before, where everything got bottlenecked up because they were trying to look to the right.
Right.
Different idea.
Yeah.
The community is also kind of neat in that we have several different departments of different types and makeups. We have industrial departments, we have federal departments, we have combinations, we have all volunteer, some are private fire districts. The interesting and the cool thing is that for years and years and years there's been an organization called the Groton Fire Officers. And that group is made up of the leadership of all the departments in town. And 20 years ago, we started writing procedures as one.
Oh, that's
so
great.
Whenever we go someplace, or whoever comes to us, we have one policy and one procedure for a lot of what we do. In fact, because of the changing of the products that are burning now, everything is magnified and multiplied much faster. We have to call more help earlier. So we built into some automatic features so that we get some of our mutual aid partners in early. But again, we have one command structure. one radio system, all the
Which
policies.
is really nice for, I think, residents to understand, because we kind of wonder how does it all work? How does it all fit together?
When you walk out of your house, you could, well, now most of the vehicles are all red and white or some combination thereof. It used to be some white trucks and yellow trucks and red trucks. But you'll see different departments there. And we receive as much as we get, or give. So it works out very equitable financially, and where we used to be able to handle more with less, now you still need more people because things go much faster.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about staying ahead of the curve, and here I thought, doing this interview today, we were going to stay ahead of the curve of winter, but we had this freak storm last Friday. But let's talk a little bit about how do you get ahead of the curve when it comes to preparing for winter?
So the state has a very good program through their emergency management. We actually have a regional coordinator who looks out for all the towns on the on the east side of the state. And as the state of Connecticut gets, and they actually have a meteorologist on staff who does grants, actually not as a meteorologist, but when he starts looking at the storms coming in, he will send us out detailed, every 2 hours we'll get an update on what's coming. We also have some folks in-house that are very much into the weather. So we'll start looking out. If it's going to be a serious storm, we'll know that. We have some proactive stuff we do, things like chainsaws.
What's a serious storm?
Well, we're very fortunate in the city. For us, a serious storm is when we're going to get over 8 inches.
Okay.
Most of our highway department does such a great job that 4 to 6 to 8 is just not a big deal. Matter of fact, it's harder for me to get to work than to be in work when it comes to the roads. But if we're looking at 6, 8, 10, 12 inches, we start looking at that process, looking at what kind of problem it's going to give us. Is it going to give us a flooding problem? Is it going to give us just straight snow? Is it going to be sleet and hail, so we have to worry about trees and wires? Because
it's like snow is not snow. It could be that wet, heavy stuff that brings down power lines, or...
Exactly, and it might even be an ice storm. Again, that extra weight onto the wires, to trees are what really, the wires are in pretty good shape. It's when the trees come down and they take out a pole or poles. Now we have an impact in that community, 100, 132, 140 or more apartments or whatever it may be. They now have no heat. They have no power for cooling their food.
So like 48 hours before the storm, you kind of get the word.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and we're doing things at that. We're looking at, do we need to staff up? We're making sure the chainsaws are ready to go in case we need to do something with the trees. All the apparatus are fueled up. We're making sure if we see a campaign coming on where we can envision 4 or 5 days, we start buying food for our people, because once we bring our people in, they don't get to go home. So what we'll do is we'll set up the assignments. We'll start assigning people to different apparatus.
So you're like everybody else at the grocery store stocking up.
Yeah, we try to get ahead of that curve. But again, it's the same stuff. You can't function, and that's one of the things we should talk about with folks. Is you should look at your worst day, your worst storm, and let's say you were out for 6 days or 5 days, whatever it may be. You should have in your basement or stored someplace that much food, water particularly, so that you can function without that. If you're lucky enough that you're only going 24, 48 hours without power because of the resources, that's one thing. But if you don't envision that, then you may need to look at a generator or some other power source, or maybe you're not staying there. Maybe you're moving outside that zone during that time.
So let's talk about that, a power outage. That's really important because it really kind of changes everything that happens at home.
Yes, it does.
So often you don't have heat if you don't have power. So what are some things that people can do maybe to prepare for a power outage?
Well, the biggest thing is if you're envisioning being without power for a couple of days or a few days, you should be looking at a generator. You need to make sure that generator is installed correctly. And then you can select with your electrician, you can select whether you're going to power the whole house, certain parts of the house. Obviously, It doesn't do any good to have food if the food spoils.
Right.
And now you have other sickness. Plus, it can get very, very cold.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big emergencies for us is when we have a senior or someone who can't afford any of that, and something happens to their power, and now we're looking at it. We can't let them stay there overnight if they're going to freeze to death.
Right.
So we need to take action to help them out. And that's where we get a hold of social services and other agencies to try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
If there's been a fire involved, then our American Red Cross is the best option, and they're tremendous.
Yeah.
We work with them a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to look at you have to be warm, you have to be able to eat, you have to have water.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some places, not in the city, but other places are on wells.
Mm-hmm.
So when the well kicks in, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to get it going.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have power, you don't have water.
Mm-hmm.
So
one of the things that I think about in that situation is people kind of trying to do their best by lighting a fire, which can create other problems, having candles burning, or you kind of mentioned trying to use your grill indoors, or I mean, it seems like you're trying to do your best, but sometimes you make a situation worse.
No, exactly. If you have a fireplace and you've had it checked and you've had your chimney cleaned and you burn wood, you know what you're doing, then there are folks that's what they do every year, and that's how they save on their oil bill. What gets a little scary is when people who don't have that experience or haven't had the chimney cleaned or inspected. And a good example is Christmas decorations.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas wrapping paper should never be burned in a wood stove or in a fireplace. It's not meant for that. It burns much faster. It's lighter, so it kind of can float around. You don't want to do that. Another important issue you brought up was we have a lot of folks that get sick every year during these types of emergencies because they're using charcoal, even in a garage, never mind inside the house. They're using charcoal inside the garage to cook. Now, obviously, you need to cook and you need to eat, but they don't understand the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide complications of that. And you can't smell carbon, either one of those gases, but they'll make you, I don't want to say stupid, but they'll make you pretty silly pretty quickly, and they can cause you to actually pass out and then die.
We're going to go to break, but before we do, maybe mention a little bit about carbon monoxide and detectors. How important are those during this time of year?
Very important. They're important every year, all the time. You should have one downstairs in your basement. You should have one up in a living space. Smoke detectors, you should have one in each sleeping space and also in the hallways. They actually make a smoke detector now you can mount in a kitchen. It actually has a little button that if you know you set it off, you can shut it off.
That you can turn off when you burn something.
If you don't have, those are readily accessible at Home Depot and all the Lowe's and all those. I would suggest you get the 10-year lithium battery. Now they're supposed to last 10 years. Some do. We're finding through studies that they're not making the full 10 years, but still they're better than having to worry about it every year and changing them out. We have everybody change their clocks, change their batteries.
Yeah, that's what we do.
With the 10-year lithium, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
If you can't afford them, if you have a financial problem that you cannot afford those, they're so important to the fire departments in this town. Go to your local fire department and ask them.
That's very good
Home
to know.
Depot, Channel 8, and KID give away thousands of smoke detectors and CO detectors every year to the fire service. So they will have some that you can have for free.
Okay.
Obviously, if you can go buy them, we want to save those for the folks that can't.
Sure. Nick, thank you for being here. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about some accidents and some things that can happen outside the home during those storms that we want to tell people about. Yeah. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I'm always the first one up. I'm always up for a challenge. I'll overcome any obstacle. I don't believe in limits. I refuse to be average.
My name is Carly. I'm 15 years old and I am a heart recipient. I got my first heart transplant when I was 1.5 years old. I got my second heart when I was 13. When I get my driver's license, of course I'm gonna say yes to be an organ donor. I've been saved twice, so who says I can't save somebody else?
This gift of life was made possible by an organ donor. Imagine what you could make possible. Sign up as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Go to organdonor.gov.
Your sneeze produces 5,000 bacteria-filled droplets, and they can travel 10 feet. So sneeze into your sleeve, and you'll reduce the spread of infection. Get the facts. It's good for you, Connecticut. It's good for all of us.
Oh, hey, bud. Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
I've been meaning to ask you, is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No.
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Welcome back to Healthwatch. We're talking today with Chief Nick DeLia from the Groton City Fire Department, trying to prepare for winter. You know, I think that one of the things that I hear is that when there's a storm coming, everybody scurries and people still try to get to where they're going. Is there some rule of thumb in terms of when you should drive, when you should not drive when a storm is here?
I think most of the time we have a good idea of the kind of conditions we should anticipate. Every once in a while, particularly on the Gold Star Bridge, because there's air underneath and air up above, some mornings it flash freezes. It just, between 5 and the sun coming up, or 6 and the sun coming up, the conditions are just right. And a lot of times we end up just stopping the traffic, because once we battle our way up there with chains and everything else on, you know, it's actually dangerous for us to even be walking up there. But most of the time, you know what's coming. You have a pretty good handle. People should always be paying attention to the updates. You can get on your cell phone. There's apps now. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, has a great app for weather conditions.
Oh, good to know.
And they'll get everything out of Albany, so you can give an idea. One of the tricks is to not be you can't be too much of a chicken, but you can also be too aggressive. And we like to err on the side of being a chicken and being more cautious or conservative. Obviously, having the right tires, having weight. If you're a pickup truck, you need some weight in the back. They do make tubes of sand, which is dual purpose.
And I've heard some of the earliest storms are the most dangerous.
Well, because people are still learning. They're trying to remember last year's driving. And so they're still getting it. The other thing is black ice, folks looking for that. Even walking. We have a lot of folks that will end up tea kettle up with their feet up in the air from the black ice, and then that normally creates problems. And again, a lot of times it's just the atmosphere. Sometimes you can't predict. It's just the atmospheric conditions. We've had on steep hills where at 7 in the morning we had to use ropes to rescue the people to get them. They had injuries, to get them down to where the ambulance was, and 4 hours later, the road was dry. Yeah, it's just all on that. One of the other issues that I wanted to talk a little bit about was shoveling. Shoveling causes a lot of injuries of different kinds every year. Everything from back strains, chest pain from doing all that strenuous work. You know, and all those different variations, falling while you're shoveling.
Right. So what are your recommendations? How can
I like little bites are better than big bites. So let's say we know it's going to be snowing for a day and a half. I think it's much better to go out and handle 3 inches at a time or 4 inches at a time rather than a foot at a time. Along the same line, if you have...
So don't wait till the storm ends.
No, get out and keep taking a little bit away. Some people use power tools, which is fine. Again, snow blowers. But again, if we're going to start the snow blower, we should be starting it outside, not letting it run inside the garage for a few minutes. And then most important thing with the snow blower is you have to know how to operate it safely.
Right.
But every once in a while, that thing's going to get clogged up. It's going to get, for whatever reason. It's very, very important. Most of them come with some kind of a appliance or a device now with some kind of a stick or piece of plastic. And you don't ever want to stick your hand into the blower where the snow comes out to try to unclog that. It's under stress. The motor is, even if the motor's off, the energy is stored in the auger.
Wow.
So if you were to stick anything other than a piece of plastic or wood down there, that auger is going to, as soon as that whatever's stopping it is gone, that auger is going to snap. We see a lot of injuries with that. The big thing is, as you know, as you get older and whatnot, some folks can carry on the shoveling. Some folks just need to hire a kid.
Yeah.
If you can find a kid that'll
Yeah, sometimes the
shovel.
Boy Scouts come out, you know.
Yep, or a relative can come over and do that.
But it might be a good thing to line up in advance.
Oh, absolutely. There's kids that'll do that. There's also plow companies that'll come and do your driveway. But you want to try to get ahead of the curve. Men are men, and we're not going to give up. That's our pride there. So sometimes we have to kind of work out a compromise where we get a little helper, and so we're still out there. Because a lot of men will have that pain, and if they don't stop, then they'll get much worse, obviously, and then we have a bigger emergency than we needed.
I was just thinking while you were talking, it's got to be really challenging to respond to a call in the middle of a storm because maybe someone hasn't taken the precautions that they need to.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of the cool things that's been happening in the fire service across the country is, yes, for your first question, yes, we'll respond there, we'll make our way there, we'll get that person out of there. One of the neat things is if it's possible and it's not too busy, sometimes the emergency personnel will finish the driveway, or so we prevent another emergency from happening. I think that's just responsive to the community.
And one of the things that you were talking about, Nick, is knowing kind of what to have in your car. Like, how do you prepare?
Yeah, you need to be ready for if you're taking a trip. So you need to make sure you do have fuel. You want to have something to drink, some kind of water in the car. Your cell phones, we want to make sure they're charged up. And then they do make kits that you put in your trunk. They have a blanket. They have like a little flashy light, a regular flashlight, maybe a radio. There's radios out there now that you don't need batteries for. Actually, they've been around for a long time. And you charge it by turning the handle. They're great during hurricanes and other storms as well, because you don't have to worry about what size battery you are creating the energy.
Yeah, we don't have the old transistors anymore.
Well, that's what this is. This is a transistor radio that you hand crank to generate it. And then again, you want to make sure that you have the ability to take care of yourself. And again, most of the time, if you can get that 911 call off, then someone will come and help you.
And what kinds of things do you think that elderly people in particular should know or should plan for?
Well, so if I know there's a storm coming, we want to make sure we have all of our meds. We want to have not only the meds I need today, we need to have the meds for 3, 4, 5 days. If it's time to renew our meds, maybe we go out a couple days early. The pharmacists are very, very kind that way, because they don't want you to be home without your meds either. And then food. Again, water is very important. You can go without food for a couple days. Water is very important. You need a gallon of water a day.
Okay.
For yourself.
So having some extra water that's not relying on your
Not
public
relying
water
on
supply.
anything, so that it's there. Before I forget, it is the Christmas season, and I want to bring up one more issue. And it's kind of a snow issue, but if you went and cut down a live Christmas tree, it is critical that that tree is still thirsty. So we need to give that tree a gallon a day of water, half in the morning, half in the evening, a third, whatever you need to do, because the difference between a tree that is drinking and a tree that is not, if it gets exposed to fire, is dramatically different.
Okay.
Dramatically different. If you want to
It's really
see
important.
go on YouTube and type in dry Christmas tree.
I think I might have seen that on TV once or twice.
But that they need to drink as well. Okay. You know, we didn't talk about pets either. Same thing. You need to be able to care for your pets. So you would need to make sure there's enough water for them as well, and their food, and any medicines they need.
Yeah. So we just have a couple of minutes, and I'm wondering, after all these years, and I know that so many people know who you are and know of your good work, but what's really been the most rewarding to you about this work?
Some of the stuff we've done, new programs we put in place, lives that have been saved. I can look at, I can still see in my head faces and folks that we changed their life. We made their life better. We saved them, prevented them. Sometimes it's not the obvious save. Sometimes we've had some desperate folks who have just come on hard times, and they just needed a hand up, not a handout, just a hand up. And because we know folks like Ledgelight, and because we know other organizations in town, American Red Cross and the Salvation Army and,
so
and the Women's Center, we may not be able to solve that person's problem as a fire department, but I can get you someone who can help you. And a lot of times if I call and say, listen, I got this, what's going on, we've done everything we can do, we need some help now, that helps. And sometimes, you know, we have to do that even in when the other folks don't want the help, but they need the help. And sometimes they're just in circumstances they shouldn't be in. They need to be into a higher level of care. And it's very hard to leave your home. But that might be, but that may save you literally.
Thank you so much for all you do, and
thank
you for being here. And the City Fire Department has a great website, so I hope everybody goes to check that out. And thank you so much for tuning in. Have a safe and healthy winter season.